Hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. I am talking about problem solving today. I have talked a lot about validation, which is really great for connection, feeling heard. It helps with co-regulation. All of that's really important for kiddos to be able to take it to the next step. Okay. We do end up getting into a major trap of venting, though. So we got to be careful of that. Once you're really good at validating, there is a next step. And I talk a lot about that validation and being able to then put it back in kids' laps, right? So what's next after that validation? How do we move forward? And that's where we put it back into their lap. Now, sometimes there isn't problem solving that is needed, but sometimes problem solving is really helpful. And so that's really what I want to talk about today. But specifically, it's not just about problem solving. There's lots of different ways. I want to focus on movement because movement plays a direct role in emotion regulation and problem solving as well. And I'm not talking about movement. I mean, we know that it helps with emotion regulation just in terms of our arousal levels and those types of things. But how can we use it specifically for problem solving? You've probably had moments yourself, right, where you suddenly figured something out. You had an aha moment when you were walking, you were taking a shower, you were exercising or doing something physical. It's not a coincidence. There really is science behind it. So if you've ever had, you're racing thoughts, you're overanalyzing everything, you're just feeling emotionally flooded, that happens when we're stressed. The brain wants to keep rehashing the problem. Okay. And when we're rehashing, we end up spiraling, don't we? We just make it bigger than it actually is. And we see this with kids too. So they need to feel heard and validated in the first place, because otherwise they get into that spiraling to make sure that you hear them. So that's why the validation is really important. But we just want to make sure we're not getting stuck in that emotional loop. Okay. Movement helps break that loop. So when we engage in a physical activity, whatever that is, it activates the prefrontal cortex, the thinking, problem-solving, self-regulating brain. And that helps us shift out of that emotional overwhelm. Now, of course, we do know it does trigger those endorphins, the serotonin, all of those chemicals that naturally boost our mood, reduce that anxiety, and help us cope a little bit better. Movement really regulates the nervous system. Okay. So it helps us move out of that fight or flight mode into a more rational thinking, self-regulating state of mind. Movement really helps redirect our mental energy. It just allows our emotions to settle a little bit more and for us to take a bigger, broader, rational perspective, right? Taking in all of the information. It creates a physical and psychological reset. It helps us reframe our thoughts. It activates that brain's problem-solving mode, and it helps make those complex physiological, the feelings that we have, those emotions just feel more manageable. So, good for everything, good for our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, but in this instance is also helping us with problem solving. Now, when we have those brilliant ideas pop up while we're doing something, it's because movement is activating a part of our brain responsible for the creative problem solving, being able to see different perspectives, right? We don't get stuck in that one sort of rigid piece. This is called embodied cognition. So when we engage in that repetitive rhythmic movement, it could be walking, it could be jogging, it could be maybe showering, depending, right? For some of us, just getting into that repetitive motion, our brains enter a more relaxed state, a more open state for those ideas to come. And so that shift is allowing insights and solutions to kind of start bubbling up to the surface, ones that we wouldn't have been able to access if we were just sitting still, overthinking the problem. See, that's the thing with when we're ruminating and just going on in our mind, it's tricking us into thinking that we're problem solving, but we're not. We're just spiraling. So if we're sitting still or trying to brainstorm, trying to come up with, you've probably even had this, even when you're calm, trying to come up with a brilliant idea, it doesn't help in that moment usually. It's when we're moving, when we're active. So that works because the movement engages our default mode network. If you've heard me talk about it, that's our brain actually likes staying in that default mode. It's the brain's background sort of processing system, and it makes unexpected connections between ideas. Okay. And so if you've heard me talk about ADHD before, I talk a lot about the default mode versus the active mode when we're trying to actively focus on something. So when we go into this default mode, it's more of that mind wandering mode, and that active physically moving, it forward sends these signals to the brain, and it's telling our brain that we are making progress. We're tricking the mind into thinking that the problem solving is being solved. And that's why movement is one of the best tools for unsticking, right? Unsticking if it's a mental block, unsticking if we're, ruminating and stuck in that spiraling emotional block as well. So there is a way we can sort of maximize that movement-based problem solving as well. So if we looked at step by step, the first thing I would do is load the problem in mind before we start moving. So we're not just gonna, okay, I'm feeling stressed, let's go for a run. I mean, cool, if you want to use up some of that cortisol, right? Your whole goal is just to use it as an emotion coping strategy. That's fine. But if you want to use it specifically for problem solving, think about that challenge. Get kids to think about the challenge that they're struggling with. Try this yourself, right? Think about what is it that I'm struggling with and frame it as a question. What's the best way to handle this? Or what's a new way that I haven't considered to handle this situation, right? So get a really specific question based on what it is we're going to problem solve through. So that's step one. Step two is we're going to step away and we're going to move. We're going to go for a walk. We're going to go for a jog. We're going to go for a bike ride, scootering. Maybe it's just simple stretching. The key is just to engage in something rhythmic, something automatic that we don't have to think too much about. So if you're still learning to ride a bike, right? If kids are learning to ride a bike, maybe riding the bike in this situation isn't going to be helpful. We want something that's automatic that they don't have to think about and that's sort of rhythmic and repetitive just to help the brain kind of go through this. So that's step two. Step three is just let the brain work in the background. We don't have to force an answer. We're just going to let thoughts come and go naturally. Okay. Hopefully, by the end of the activity, there's going to be a little bit more clarity or a new perspective. Maybe or maybe not, right? We don't know for sure that there's going to be an aha moment, but the more we can engage and practice this, the more we're going to be able to see that. But I mean, if we look through other people's stories who've been successful, I mean, Steve Jobs, he had walking meetings, right? That just helped his ideas flow. It just gets the brain going. It greases up everything, right? When we start moving, Albert Einstein, he often solved physics problems while he was, playing an instrument. Whatever, that rhythmic sort of thing that he was doing. So he's allowing his brain to make connections unconsciously. And we see this with students, with writers, with creatives, inventors, right? Maybe even your own kids at bedtime when we're going for our walk, before bedtime walk or our routines, whatever we're going through, those automatic sort of processes. But really, the movement breaks just help refresh our focus and overcome any of those mental blocks. And kids aren't getting enough movement anyway, and they really need movement. It's so critical. When we look at what the guidelines are for kids' movements, they aren't getting the daily dose of movement that they need. And if they're feeling frustrated, if they're feeling anxious, if they're feeling overwhelmed, we know that their ability to think clearly just shuts down, right? That prefrontal cortex goes offline, that self-regulating brain goes offline. So movement helps reset that nervous system and improves their focus. So we can start thinking of ways, how can we incorporate movement for kids? Okay. Maybe during homework time, every 15 to 20 minutes, shorter times for little kids, let them stand, let them stretch, let them walk around. It's really having brain body breaks to improve that concentration, that emotion regulation. Walking and talking is really helpful. I actually, in therapy, I used to do a lot of walking, talking when I had a rural office where we could just go out in the fields, right, and just walk and walk and walk without anyone ever coming across us. That can be so helpful. I had the most progress when I was doing that. But for kids as well, walking and talking is so helpful. If they're upset, that short walk can just help reframe the problem, right? If we're discussing it, it just makes those conversations less confrontational as well and a lot more solution focused. So that's a great way to kind of try that. One hack that I talk about, we know if we've ever been in a close call, a close accident, afterwards our body's shaking. That's our nervous system's way of calming itself down. So this is a little hack. It's just to shake it off. When we're rattled, right, our nervous system is shaking. So how can we use that shaking? We see boxers and wrestlers when they're coming out before their match, they're kind of bouncing, right? So we can use that with kids. Maybe they're, shaking their arms, they're jumping, they're doing a silly dance when they're feeling frustrated. That releases a lot of the pent-up energy and helps calm the nervous system down. Now, we're not focusing on calming. I don't want to focus on an outcome here. That's so important. If you know me, you'll know that that's not something that we want to do. It just might, right? That's the cherry on top. We're just opening up our systems and our brain and our thinking. So that's really what we want to do. Skipping is fantastic. Just so you know, I've started skipping a lot. It's helpful for our body, especially as we're aging. And I made my husband skip with me the other day, and you just can't not smile and laugh, right? And that just opens up the brain. So try a move and think strategy before making a big decision. We're encouraging kids to take that movement break. Again, walk, run, pacing, skipping, whatever it is, just to help clarity. Recess outdoor play, of course, is really important. Even for our high school kids, we don't have enough. I can't stress this enough. Even our high school kids need to get outside and have breaks throughout the day. We know that schools that allow more movement breaks throughout the day, they have better student focus, fewer behavioral issues, better emotional well-being, and overall self-regulation. Okay. So this week's challenge is to use that load and move method for problem solving. So think about a challenge that they're facing, have them take a 10 to 15 minute walk or some sort of movement, whatever form that takes, and have them notice their problem solving, maybe their perspective shifts right after they move. Making sure we're incorporating movement into a child's daily routine, right? Movement breaks during homework time, class time, as much as we can, walking conversations instead of sitting to face. That's the other thing, too. Side by side just takes off any potential conflict there. The shake it off, right? So, those are a few things that we can just get our body moving to help with problem solving because it's so important even just for our health, right? And it's not just the physical health. It's one of the most effective ways that we can regulate our emotions. We're gaining clarity and solving problems. So I will leave it there. I will make sure I put all of those homework ideas in the show notes, so definitely check them out. But this, I would say, is a really important priority that we need to have. I'm always talking before kids can have screens at the end of the day. We need to make sure they've got some developmental opportunities happening, and movement is definitely one, at least an hour ideally. But for problem solving, at least that 10 to 15 minutes is good. Help those kiddos be bold and courageous. Get them moving. If you found this episode helpful, share it with another parent or teacher or anyone you think who could use these strategies. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.